In this episode of Believe in Lightning, we're taking a look at today's opener against the Hurricanes. We talk about some of the factors that will go into a Lightning win, as well as some of our predictions. All that coming up and more on Believe in Lightning. And welcome to another episode of Lightning, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Believe in Lightning. Just before we grab any of those topics today, I want to remind you to go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. We're available wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and look for us there. On this episode, we're talking about today's season opener with the Hurricanes in Carolina. We talk about that game. We talk about some of our predictions. We talk about some of the keys to winning. Before we grab any of those, I just want to extend my thoughts to all of you that live in the Tampa Bay area, as well as other parts of Florida that were affected by the two hurricanes that hit in the last couple of weeks. I hope you are all safe. I hope you are all able to evacuate safely, and my thoughts are with you. So we are finally on day one of the NHL season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. It has been a long time coming, and I have to say that as we have gotten ever closer to the start of the season, I have gone from overly optimistic to cautiously positive. And I'm not saying that because of who they're facing in their first game of the season. That has nothing to do with that. It's just when you look at what this Lightning team has and what they are up against in the division. And yes, I look at the other teams in the division outside of outside of the Florida Panthers. I still do think the Lightning have a very good shot of competing at a very high level in this division. But that is all on paper. That is what, and if you've been following my work for the last 4 or 5 years, you know very well that I am very big on the eye test. And what I mean by that is when you look at this hockey team, even if they are going out and winning games, the more important thing is how are they winning those games, and that will be a big thing that I think we will all have to look out for in tonight's game against the Carolina Hurricanes. And looking at the lines real quick, I think that is something that really a lot of Lightning fans will have to keep an eye out for as well, just because if you want to follow along, go on Daily Face-Off. I don't think that really any of these lines are set in stone. I spoke about it in my recent article. By the way, if you want to follow more of my work, I'm with the Hockey News. I cover the Lightning for the Hockey News, so go ahead and check that out. My thing with all of that is I spoke about it then when I was talking about Anthony Cirelli, that really this team, especially the top six, I think is going to be very fluid in terms of where John Cooper decides to put things with this Lightning team. I don't think if you look at that top line with Getzel, Point, and Cooch, that really Jake Getzel, is that going to be a solid place for him all season long? Most likely not. Is Brandon Hagel going to be on the second line all season? Probably not. The same goes for Anthony Cirelli. We all know over the last couple of years that John Cooper is not afraid of switching things around. But I think more now than ever, we're going to see that a lot more often, just because of the elephant in the room that is going to be spoken about for the next couple of months, which is, I think, going to get very tiring as we do it more and more. And that's going to be, how can the Lightning adjust to life without Steven Stamkos? And really, it's going to be able to find someone who could compete at a high level consistently and fill that role. And when I say that, I don't mean necessarily that someone is going to be able to score 40 goals a year or score at a level that Steven Stamkos did. No, if you're a Lightning fan and you've been very much involved in watching this team over the last couple of years, you could kind of make the case for not wanting that. because, and this is no shot at him, I'm not going to be that person, and I'm definitely not that person who is going to sit here and take shots at Stamkos all season long. But the fact of the matter is the reality was when Stamkos was here, yes, he put up the numbers, but it wasn't in the way you wanted this team to have it because it didn't really help the Lightning. And what I mean by that is you can look at his numbers. I don't have them in front of me right now, but Stamkos was very reliant on the power play. Something that, yes, the Lightning were the best team in the league, and that's a huge part of it because he scored all his goals practically on the power play. But you need a player who could come out in the top six and score at an even pace on 5-on-5 and the power play, because the Lightning aren't going to always have the luxury of drawing 4 to 5 penalties a night. That's just not something that happens, as we've seen in years past. Sometimes the Lightning maybe get the power play once. That's just the way the cookie crumbles in the NHL sometimes. But I think that really what it comes down to it is that, and I think it's probably a good thing, I think, for the long term for the Lightning to have had this happen. I think that really when you're looking at this lineup and you look at some of the personnel you have around you, I think Steven Stamkos leaving was the best thing for you. And it might suck in the moment when you're going through those initial first 15 games where everyone is trying to figure out who they are and what they could do with what other players on their lines. But I think that when it boils down to it, when you're getting into the thick of the NHL season, when we're in February, when we're in March, and you're fighting for spots. Hopefully, the Lightning are in the top 3 spot in the division where we don't really have to worry about that. But I think that really what the Lightning have, even though I am still cautiously optimistic about what they have, and that's more so because we don't know what we have, but with the names on paper, I think they're in a good spot to have um, the opportunity for certain players on this team, like a Brandon Hagel, like an Anthony Cirelli, like a Jake Getzel, even though, yeah, he's going to start the season on the first line with Point and Cooch, I don't think that's a position where he's going to be longed for the rest of the season. I think, though, that what we see in this first game against Carolina, a team that, yes, has had some changes themselves this past offseason, but very much so a team that is still very much experienced. I think that that's going to be a very good first test for the Lightning in their opening match of the season. And of course, if you haven't heard, tomorrow's game is postponed due to some of the damage that was suffered during the hurricane. So the Lightning will not be opening up the season uh, tomorrow night. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait just a little bit longer, maybe till Tuesday when they open up against Vancouver. We'll have to check that out. But coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about some of the keys to this game against the Carolina Hurricanes. Before we grab that, I just want to humbly remind you, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. You can follow me on Twitter at DenkyDank, DenkyDank. You could also follow the show at Believe in Lightning on Twitter and Instagram. You could follow me, more of my work, over at the Hockey News. Go ahead and check out my work. Had a really good time going over some of the deeper issues surrounding the Lightning and just storylines there. Like I said, just wrote an article discussing Anthony Cirelli and how much he's going to mean to this team this year. So looking at tonight's game against the Carolina Hurricanes, some of the keys that will present themselves tonight and some of the things that the Lightning will need to do is, obviously, the Lightning will have to get off to a good start. We've spoken about that through to exhaustion, whether it be here on Believe in Lightning or on my past shows over at Locked On Lightning. I've spoken about that. Really, it's been an issue for the Lightning for the last 4 years. Really, just it's gotten worse and worse, where they've had the personnel in the past to kind of get past that and almost cheat fate. What I mean by fate is that usually teams that do not start off well do not win a lot of games. The Lightning have been obviously because of that had a lot of comeback wins. But I think that really it's more important than ever this season for the Lightning to really get off to a good start. Like I said, they don't have that added bullet in the gun being Steven Stamkos. Maybe they'll have that as the season progresses. Maybe it'll be Jake Getzel, maybe it'll be Brandon Hagel, maybe it'll be Connor Geekie. Who knows? But right now, to do yourself a favor, just go ahead and just play hockey a full 60 minutes, just so you don't have to get out of the hole that you dug yourself on early on in the game. So that is going to be something that is going to be interesting to see. How can the Lightning get things going early on? Like I said, one of the more slower teams in the first 10 in the NHL last year. I think that a lot of that will have to do with little spark plug players like Connor Geekie, like a Brandon Hagel, like a Mikey Esimont. That's why I think this third line for the Lightning is going to be very important for them. A lot of table setters on that team, Cam Atkinson, along with two younger players, Esimont and Geekie. I think that's a good mix there. I think that he, with his vast experience in the NHL, that is going to be able to get those guys dialed in relatively quickly. And I think it's going to set the tone for the Lightning going forward. As we all know and have seen in years past, John Cooper likes to start his third line more times than not. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's how we get things going tonight. Then again, who knows? It's the first game of the season, just for ceremonial purposes or whatever you want to call it. Maybe Cooper will throw out the first line there. Whatever happens off the initial puck drop, guys got to get going. They got to, get the pucks. And it's a lot of that really just those trigger words that when we're talking about hockey in general, really the Lightning need to do that. Just get the pucks in deep, get them in the corners, get the goaltender active early on. You never want to get those guys, regardless of who they are, whether they're Connor Hellebuck or, maybe a lesser known goaltender. You definitely don't want to get those guys comfortable early on because it's going to be really tough to get to them early on. And as for who's going to play tonight for the Hurricanes, I don't know if they've announced it yet. I think it's going to be Peter Kutkechov. Who knows? We'll see. Preferably would like to see Frederik Andersen, just because I feel like the Lightning have had better luck against him in the past. But it's one of those things where really it doesn't matter who is in net for Carolina. You just got to go out there and play hockey. That's really what it comes down to. The other keys to the game, I think, is really going to be to see what side of Nikita Kucherov we get tonight. And what I mean by that is that, you've seen with other superstar players in the past that have had really good seasons sometimes, and this is not just hockey, it's all sports. There's sometimes a little bit of a letdown or a little just a hangover from the previous season. I'm not expecting him to have a phenomenal season, 140 points, something around that, though. He might need to get to that 120 just because of some of the unknowns surrounding this Lightning team. But really what it comes down to is, are we going to see a Nikita Kucherov that is very passive? Are we going to see a guy like that who is very passive, not shooting a lot, looking to facilitate more? Or are we going to see a Nikita Kucherov who prefers to go out and shoot a lot early on? I would prefer to see the latter, because that does open things up for Kucherov down the line in the game. And that's the thing you have to think about if you're Nikita Kucherov and John Cooper. Is that, you want to get him going early on, whether he's scoring goals or just putting pucks on net, because at the end of the day, that's going to get the opposing team thinking. That's going to allow Kucherov to find the open guy, whether it be a Braden Point or Jake Getzel or whoever is playing with them at that time, or even one of their defensemen, a Victor Hedman. That's going to be something that really is going to not only help the Lightning going forward in the game, but also going to help Kucherov, because as we all know, he loves getting those assists. So you definitely want to get him going early on, because as we've seen in years past, when Kuch gets the puck in near the slot, opposing teams, they collapse on him. And then he does what he does great, no look passes or threads the needle on a pass on a one-timer. And that's where really things start to get going for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So you definitely want to see what version of Nikita Kucherov we get through the first 20. Is it a passer, or is it a guy that is going out there looking to score goals? Obviously, you want to get a little bit of both, but you definitely want to get the score because, like I said, the passing will come, the open chances will come. You just got to set the table for yourself if you're Nikita Kucherov. My last key to the game is Andre Vasilevsky in the defense. We spoke about it last year, if you've been following my work since then, that the defense has not done a good job. They were probably one of the worst defenses in the league. I'm not going off numbers. I'm just going off the eye test. And it really didn't allow Andre Vasilevsky at certain points in the season, whether it was when he came back from injury or whether it was in the playoffs, for him to really get going. The playoffs was a different scenario. We saw him really get going on his own. It was kind of flashes of Vezina level Vasilevsky there. But I think that really, regardless of what version of Andre Vasilevsky we're going to get, it's going to be very important for the defense in front of him to get going, to shut down passes and not turn over the puck, and just doing the little things in order for him to get settled in. Because I think once he gets settled in, if we get playoff Vasilevsky from 2024, I think the Lightning are in a pretty good situation to start off the season, and definitely will set the table for a Vancouver game and the subsequent games that follow, a Vegas as well, and Ottawa. I mean, the Lightning have a very tough schedule to start the season, and I really expect for maybe, except for the back-to-back game against Toronto and New Jersey, that Vasilevsky is going to start all of those. I mean, there's really no reason why. If I was John Cooper, I would start him for that back-to-back as well. Don't see any reason why he can't play 3 games in 4 days. That's just me. It's not like he's a 40-year-old goaltender. It's not like he's a 35-year-old goaltender. He's refreshed. He's had all season to do what to get himself right. And yeah, you need to let the horse out of the barn. And I think that really, this game will really tell us what version of Vasilevsky we will get, because with Vasilevsky in years past, as we have seen, especially during the cup runs, it takes a little while for him to get going, whether it be just finding a rhythm. But like I stated, I think on maybe one of the first podcast episodes we did of this show, that the thing that really stuck out to me was his body language. And I think that's something Lightning fans need to look at in order to make a decision on whether or not they feel comfortable. Because if Vasilevsky is making little saves with a ton of confidence, he's dialed in. If it looks like he's straining early on and just giving up, nonsense goals, which we have seen in the past, the Lightning might be in trouble. And that's where the defense, especially the defenseman, the blue line, is going to have to come up big, which right now, regardless of the addition of Ryan McDonagh, I still don't feel comfortable as to where this defense is going to look. The big question mark, obviously, is going to be Eric Chernak. He struggled immensely last season. That's going to be something that I think really, if you're a Lightning fan and you just want to keep your eye on the defense when they're in their own zone and seeing who is playing well and who's not looking like a sure thing out there, it's going to be 81. I think really Eric Chernak, as much as I am rooting for the guy, I just think the clock is ticking on his time here in Tampa Bay. It's really just by his own doing, and some of it by not his own doing, just because he's struggled immensely with staying on the ice. That's just something that happens with a guy that plays the game he does. But when he's been on the ice, he has not played well at all. And that has been something that has been very frustrating. It forced the Lightning's hand to bring back Ryan McDonagh in the offseason, bring in J.J. Moser in that trade that sent Mikhail Sergachev to Utah. And that's another guy I think that is going to be interesting to see in how he meshes with this Lightning team. It's going to be J.J. Moser. I was very excited once I did a little bit of a deep dive into him. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I knew exactly who he was when the Lightning traded for him and the Mikhail Sergachev trade. But after seeing how he played, some of his past film, and looking at his stats, I think that he offers the Lightning a really two-way game, that's something that the Lightning have really missed, something they thought they were going to get out of Nick Pervix. That hasn't been the case. So a lot of things, a lot of variables going into the Lightning defense. Obviously, Andre Vasilevsky being one of them, and obviously the defense in front of him. How is McDonough and Chernak? Are they going to be able to get that chemistry back that we saw from the Cup winning years? How is Radish and Perbix going to mesh together? That is yet to be seen, as well as Hedman and Moser. I'm not too worried about them. I'm more worried about Hedman. Is he going to look old tonight? Is he going to look weathered down? Is he going to bring some more of that scoring that we have enjoyed from him over the last couple of years? There's a lot of questions there with him as well. And it'll all be answered in tonight's game, at least partially. I mean, you can't determine the rest of the season in one game. Still got 81 more games to play. So obviously there's room for improvement, but there's going to be a lot of questions to be answered tonight. And really some of the keys that we brought up for the Lightning to win this game, I think is really going to partially start the conversation in whether or not this team is ready to play hockey in 24-25. So wrapping things up real quick on the show, once again, I want to thank you all for joining us here on Believe in Lightning. You can follow more of my work over at the Hockey News. You can follow the show wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We're going to be ramping up the content here on Believe in Lightning. We're available in Believe in Lightning on Instagram and Believe in Bolts on X. So my predictions for tonight's game, I would have to say that I think that we are going to see a way more mature version of Connor Geekie than we probably would have expected if you were to ask anyone when the trade happened. Just because he's a very young player, he still has a lot of ways to go in his development, but from the little snapshots that we have seen of him in the rookie camp and preseason, I was very impressed. I was very impressed with just how he conducted himself. I was impressed by just his body language, and that goes a long way when you're looking and evaluating where young talent is in the NHL, because with any sport, the game moves a lot faster at that level when you're in the pro levels. And the way Connor Geekie has thus far been able to navigate that has been very impressive to me. So I would expect not a big night, but I would expect him to get a couple of points tonight. Expect him to have a couple of good defensive plays. That's part of the reason why the Lightning brought him in, is his two-way ability. His ability to not shy away from throwing his weight around even at a young age. So that's the good thing about him, is that he will be able to handle his business out there. You know, a lot of these young players, they're thrown out there, they are significantly smaller than some of the players that you've seen, obviously, because they are still growing. But I think Geekie will be able to handle his business out there. Another young player that I predict is going to have a good night tonight is Mitchell Chaffee. Chaffee was one of my favorite players down the line for the Lightning last year. He is playing on the fourth line tonight, but I would not be surprised if we see him get some minutes with the third line. If the Lightning especially are not having a good night physically, I wouldn't be surprised if Atkinson, just for the sake of getting your grinder line going and having some of your young guns out there together just to get some more speed and just offensive prowess, I wouldn't be surprised if Chaffee is moved up to the third line. Esamont, Geekie. Chaffee, like I said, really impressed me in the very small amount of time at the NHL level last year, made a lot of good defensive plays while he was in the lineup, was able to get some offensive chances as well. So, yeah, I think Chaffee's going to have a good night. And really, I think that's something that a lot of Lightning fans should hope for tonight, is that the young players really show out tonight. Like I said, Geekie, Esamont, Chaffee, that's really going to be the tail of the tape tonight for the Lightning, is can their young players really step up to the plate and deliver for them in little spots? I'm not saying carry the load in terms of scoring, but can they be somewhat table setters for the rest of their team, whether it be through physical attributions or scoring or whatever the case may be. Just doing the little things. That's something that I've always emphasized, whether you're an 18-year veteran or it's your first year in the league with any in the NHL at any position, even goaltender. Can you do the little things? Because really that's what it comes down to winning hockey games is if you do the little things, the big things will come to fruition. Can you make the plays along the board? Can you control the puck in the neutral zone? Something the Lightning struggled mightily in the playoffs with when they were playing the Panthers. Granted, it was the eventual Stanley Cup champions, but still, that goes into any play against any team. Can you control the neutral zone? Can you take care of the puck? Can you do the dirty work along the boards? If you could do a little bit of that, can you take care of your own net? If you could do little things like that, you'll be able to score. You'll be able to turn the tides. You'll be able to give yourself momentum. And I think that if the Lightning could do that, especially their young group of players, like I said, that they have playing tonight, I think they're going to put themselves in a big spot, a good spot to win this game because you have seasoned vets with you. You have McDonough, like I said, Chernak, even Hedman, obviously the Kucherovs, the Points, Getzels, Hagels, Sorelli, Paul. I could keep going on. But really what it comes down to is can the younger players set the table in a way to where the veterans just go out and take care of business. And that's really going to be the story for this team all season long. And I think that if I had to put a prediction on this game is I think the Lightning are going to win 4-3. I think that we're going to see a shaky game of back and forth. I mean, if you looked at every other NHL team the last couple of nights, all have been high scoring. I think it just has to do with the first night. Everyone's jacked up. A lot of people are kind of rusty at the same time. You know, you can't really replicate NHL game, regular season games and preseason. It's a little bit different, but here it is, the first of 82 for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I expect them to have a good night tonight. So let me know in the comments below if you're following us on YouTube. What are your predictions for tonight's game? We'll be back next week. I think we're going to do about 3 to 4 shows next week, so keep an eye on that. Hit that notification button wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form on a platform, whether it be an app or wherever on YouTube. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So that's been it for this episode of Believe in Lightning, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.